The day before Zorthax was scheduled to return to the Hegemony fleet, he sat alone in his quarters writing his final report. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he carefully chose his words. After extensive observation, I must revise my initial assessment of human gaming behavior, he wrote. Humans do not use games primarily as military training. Instead, their games serve as laboratories for creative thinking. He paused, thinking about everything he had seen during his time on Earth. I recommend that the Hegemony pursue alliance rather than containment with humans. Their approach to problem-solving would complement our disciplined methods. Together, our species could achieve more than either could alone. Zorthax sent the report and waited. The response from High Command came faster than he expected. Your recommendation is approved, Admiral. Begin preliminary alliance discussions. The next morning, Zorthax met with General Walsh and Captain Rodriguez to share the Hegemony's new position. The humans seemed relieved but cautious. We welcome this change in approach, General Walsh said. But what changed your mind, Admiral? Your games, Zorthax answered honestly. I believe they were training your species for war. Now I understand they train you for something more valuable. Innovation. After the meeting, John took Zorthax to say goodbye to his sister and nephew. When they arrived, Kevin was playing a new game. What is this one? Zorthax asked, watching the screen with interest. It's called Cosmic Pioneers, Kevin explained. Instead of fighting, you have to work with alien species to survive on a new planet. Zorthax watched as Kevin's character cooperated with various alien beings, solving problems and building a community together. Would you like to try? Kevin offered, holding out the controller. To John's surprise, the Admiral sat down next to the boy and carefully took the controller in his large hands. You press this to move, Kevin explained patiently, and this button to interact with other characters. Zorthax played awkwardly at first. His large fingers struggled with the small controls, but soon he was guiding his character through the game world, making decisions and solving puzzles. You're pretty good for a beginner, Kevin said after a while. I am learning to think like a human, Zorthax replied. When it was time to leave, Lisa had a suggestion. Kevin has been invited to attend a special gaming academy next summer. With the new alliance forming, perhaps some young Hegemony students could join the program too. Zorthax considered this. An excellent idea. Learning to think creatively would benefit our young officers greatly. On the ride back to the base, Zorthax shared his thoughts with John. Your nephew will receive a formal invitation to study at the Hegemony Space Academy, he said. We are establishing a new joint program for gifted human and Hegemony students. John looked surprised. That's a great honor, but Kevin is just a kid who plays games. Exactly, Zorthax said. And that is precisely why we need him and others like him. The Hegemony has the best military training in the galaxy, but we lack the creative thinking that comes so naturally to humans. As they reached the base where Zorthax's shuttle waited, the Admiral looked out at the blue sky of Earth one last time. I came here believing I would find a species secretly preparing for war, he said quietly. Instead, I found a species that turns even the most serious matters into play. And in doing so, you discover possibilities that more disciplined minds would never consider. John smiled. That's just being human, I guess. It is a remarkable quality, Zorthax replied. One the galaxy needs more of. 6 months later, Kevin Carter became the first human student at the Joint Human Hegemony Space Academy, and Admiral Zorthax, now the director of the new program, welcomed him personally with a game controller in hand. The Admiral who had once feared human war games now understood their true power. They weren't training to conquer the galaxy. They were learning to reimagine it. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Human and Hegemony officials stared at each other across the table. One wrong word could turn this diplomatic crisis into something much worse. Captain Amy Rodriguez stepped forward. Unlike the others in the room, she smiled. Admiral Zorthax has made an interesting observation, she said calmly. Instead of arguing about it, why don't we put it to the test? Everyone turned to look at her. I propose a cultural exchange program, Amy continued. Let's have some of your young officers learn our games. If they're truly military training, your people should master them quickly, right? The Hegemony High Commander's image flickered as he considered this. An interesting proposal, Captain Rodriguez. General Walsh nodded slowly. It would allow for direct observation rather than speculation. After some discussion, both sides agreed. The next day, 10 young Hegemony officers joined a group of human gamers at a large gaming center. John brought his nephew Kevin along at Amy's request. The Hegemony officers were confident at first. They were elite military personnel with years of tactical training. How hard could human games be? Very hard, it turned out. The aliens struggled with the most basic games. Their thinking was too rigid, too formal. When Kevin easily defeated a Hegemony lieutenant in a space strategy game, the alien was shocked. But I followed perfect military protocol, the lieutenant complained. Kevin shrugged. That's why I won. You're too predictable. Over the next few days, the cultural exchange continued. The Hegemony officers slowly began to understand. Humans weren't following military rules in their games. They were making up new rules, trying crazy ideas, and learning from failure. They don't play like soldiers, one Hegemony officer told Zorthax privately. They play like children discovering the world. Zorthax watched it all with growing interest. He had been wrong, at least partly. Humans weren't training for war exactly. They were training their minds to be flexible, to try new approaches, to think creatively. On the final day of the exchange, Amy arranged a special event. Kevin would play against the Hegemony's top tactician in a game called Stellar Conquest. The match would be displayed on large screens for everyone to watch. The Hegemony tactician, Officer Drell, had studied human games intensely. He felt ready. Kevin just seemed excited to play. The game began. Officer Drell applied perfect Hegemony tactics, carefully managing his resources and positioning his fleet according to military doctrine. Kevin played differently. He tried unusual moves, took risks, and sometimes made choices that seemed to make no sense. At first, Drell took the lead. His methodical approach gave him an early advantage. But as the game progressed, Kevin's creative thinking began to pay off. He found weaknesses in Drell's rigid strategy. He used unexpected tactics that the Hegemony officer had never seen before. 2 hours into the match, Kevin won decisively. The human observers cheered. The Hegemony officers looked stunned but impressed. How did you know that strategy would work? Officer Drell asked Kevin afterward. It goes against all established military doctrine. Kevin grinned. I didn't know. I just thought it might be fun to try. Zorthax watched this exchange with new understanding. In the Hegemony, failure was punished. Perfect obedience to rules was rewarded. But humans encouraged their young to experiment, to break rules, to try the impossible. You were right about one thing, Admiral, John said quietly, standing beside Zorthax. Our games do prepare us for life, including war. But not by teaching us rules to follow. They teach us to think for ourselves. Zorthax nodded slowly. And that, Lieutenant Miller, makes your species more unpredictable than we ever imagined. The Admiral realized now that humans weren't naturally better warriors than other species. They were naturally better innovators. And in war, as in games, innovation often led to victory. Word spread quickly through the Hegemony fleet orbiting Earth. Admiral Zorthax's reports had caused great concern among his people. Officers began looking at humans differently. The once friendly diplomatic mission now had an edge of tension. Captain Amy Rodriguez noticed the change. As the head of Earth's diplomatic security team, it was her job to watch for potential problems. The alien visitors had become more guarded, more watchful. Some were now recording everyday human activities that they had ignored before. Something's changed, Amy told her team during their morning briefing. The Hegemony delegates are acting strange. Keep your eyes open, but don't do anything to make them nervous. Meanwhile, John received a message from his superior officer. Lieutenant Miller, we've noticed unusual interest from Admiral Zorthax in civilian recreation, particularly gaming. The message read, while maintaining diplomatic courtesy, please limit his exposure to certain facilities going forward. John frowned at the message. He had also noticed the Admiral's strange focus on human games. What had started as casual curiosity now seemed like a serious investigation. But why would an alien military leader care so much about video games? That afternoon, John met with Zorthax for their scheduled tour. The Admiral seemed distracted. Is everything all right, Admiral? John asked as they walked. Yes, Lieutenant. I am simply processing what I have learned about your species, Zorthax replied. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his kind. And what have you learned? John asked carefully. Zorthax looked down at the human. That appearances can be deceiving. Your species seems peaceful, but you are always preparing for conflict. John stopped walking. That's not true. Humans value peace. Perhaps, but you train for war from childhood. If you're talking about games again, Admiral, you're misunderstanding our culture. Games are just entertainment. Before Zorthax could respond, both of their communication devices signaled an alert. They were being called to an emergency meeting at the diplomatic center. When they arrived, the large meeting room was filled with tension. Human representatives sat on one side of the table. Hegemony officials sat on the other. Captain Amy Rodriguez stood near the door, her face serious. Admiral Zorthax, please join your delegation, said General Peter Walsh, Earth's chief diplomatic officer. We have matters to discuss. Zorthax took his seat. The Hegemony High Commander's image appeared on a large screen, joining the meeting from orbit. It has come to our attention, General Walsh began, that certain members of the Hegemony delegation have been gathering intelligence on human civilian activities, particularly those involving our children. The High Commander's voice was cold. We are conducting standard cultural observation as agreed in our diplomatic protocols. Recording children without permission goes beyond cultural observation, General Walsh replied. We want to know why. All eyes turned to Zorthax. As the senior hegemony officer on the surface, he was expected to explain. I have observed that humans use games to train their young in warfare, Zorthax said directly. Your children learn military strategy through play. Your adults perfect these skills through entertainment. You have created a society where every citizen receives basic military training disguised as recreation. The room fell silent. Then several human representatives began to laugh. That's ridiculous, one said. Games are just games, said another. General Walsh didn't laugh. Admiral, I assure you that our games are not military training programs. They're entertainment, nothing more. Zorthax stood slowly, his tall frame towering over the seated humans. Then explain how a human child can master the tricorn formation without military training. Explain how your civilians understand complex resource management during conflict. Explain how your species, with no natural defenses, has defeated 3 separate alien forces. A High Commander's image leaned forward. We believe humans are a species of natural warriors, hiding their true nature behind a mask of peaceful civilization. Captain Amy Rodriguez moved closer to General Walsh, her hand moving toward her weapon. Around the room, both human and hegemony security personnel tensed. The diplomatic mission that had started with such promise now stood on the edge of disaster. Over the next few days, Zorthax expanded his investigation. He asked John to take him to places where humans spent their free time. His goal was to observe more of these games that humans played. Their first stop was a place called an arcade. Inside the large, dimly lit building, screens flickered and sounds blared from all directions. Humans of all ages stood at machines, moving controls and pressing buttons. These are video games, John explained. People come here to play and have fun. Zorthax moved slowly through the arcade, watching each game carefully. Some were simple tests of reflexes. Others were deeply complex simulations of battle, resource management, and strategy. At one machine, an adult human was playing a game where he controlled a fleet of ships, much like Kevin had been doing. 3 young humans watched him play, learning his techniques. "Is this the same game Kevin plays?" Zorthax asked. "Similar, but more advanced," John replied. "This one is called Galactic Command. It's very popular with adults." Zorthax watched as the player made quick decisions, adjusted to new threats, and executed complex maneuvers. These were the same skills that hegemony officers trained for years to master. "And humans do this for entertainment?" Zorthax asked. "Exactly. Just for fun." They visited more places after the arcade. A sports center where humans played games that taught teamwork and tactical thinking. A puzzle room where humans worked together to solve problems under time pressure. A board game cafe where humans competed in games of strategy and resource management. Everywhere they went, Zorthax saw the same pattern. Humans were constantly playing games that taught them skills useful in warfare. In the evening, they returned to the base. John turned on a viewing screen to relax. Zorthax was surprised to see a large competition being broadcast. Young humans were playing a war simulation game while thousands of others watched. "What is this?" Zorthax asked. "Esports tournament," John explained. "Professional gamers competing for prize money. It's a big deal now. Some of these players make millions." Zorthax stared at the screen. "Your society rewards those who excel at these war games." "They're not war games," John said with a small frown. "They're just games." But Zorthax knew better now. He had seen enough to understand the truth. Humans had created a society where military training was disguised as entertainment. Their young learned warfare through play. Their adults continued to practice through games. Their best strategists were celebrated like heroes. That night, in his private quarters, Zorthax reviewed old hegemony records about humans. He found reports of early encounters when humans first reached space. The reports expressed surprise at human military success against more advanced species. No one could explain how such a physically weak species could be so effective in battle. Now Zorthax understood. Humans had been preparing for war their entire lives, from the time they were small children. Not through formal military training, but through games. Every human child who played these simulations was learning skills that would make them dangerous in real conflict. Zorthax sent another report to Hegemony High Command. "Humans have created a perfect training system. Their young believe they are playing, but they are actually learning warfare. Their games teach strategy, resource management, teamwork, and adaptability. All crucial skills in battle. By the time a human reaches adulthood, they have spent thousands of hours practicing these skills. Even those who never join their military forces have basic tactical training through entertainment." The response from High Command came quickly. "Your findings are disturbing, Admiral. Continue observation, but exercise extreme caution. If humans are deliberately training their entire population for war, they may be planning galactic expansion. The hegemony must be prepared." Zorthax looked out his window at the night sky. He had come to Earth to learn about humans. Now he wondered if he had discovered something that would change how the entire galaxy viewed this strange, game-playing species. The next morning, Zorthax requested a change to his visit schedule. He wanted to see a human educational facility. "A school?" John asked, looking surprised. "That wasn't in our original plan. I wish to understand how humans develop their young," Zorthax explained. "It is important for cultural understanding." John made some calls and arranged the visit. 2 hours later, they arrived at a large building with many small humans running around outside. "This is Lincoln Elementary School," John said as they walked toward the entrance. "Children from ages 5 to 11 study here." The principal, a woman named Susan Wright, met them at the door. She had been told about the important alien visitor and looked both nervous and excited. "Welcome to our school, Admiral," she said with a smile. "The children are very excited to meet you." As they walked through the hallways, small humans stopped and stared. Some waved, others pointed. None seemed afraid of the large alien with 4 eyes and scaled skin. "What are those children doing?" Zorthax asked, pointing to a classroom where young humans were building something with small blocks. "That's an engineering challenge," Principal Wright explained. "They're learning about structural stability and teamwork." Zorthax watched closely. The children were competing in teams, trying to build the tallest structure. But it wasn't just about height. They had to plan carefully, think about weight distribution, and adjust their strategy when things didn't work. They visited more classrooms. In each one, Zorthax saw something that troubled him. Children solving problems, children working in teams, children learning to think several steps ahead. "And what about games?" Zorthax asked as they walked. "Do the children play games here?" "Of course," Principal Wright replied. "During recess and physical education, play is an important part of learning." They went outside to the playground where children were enjoying their break time. Some played simple running games. Others were engaged in more complex activities. Zorthax's attention was drawn to a group playing with a ball. They had organized themselves into teams, created a strategy, and were adapting as the game progressed. Another group was playing a board game that involved controlling territory and managing resources. "These games," Zorthax said quietly to John. "They teach strategy." John shrugged. "I guess so. Kids learn all kinds of things through play." Principal Wright smiled proudly. "Our curriculum includes many game-based learning activities. Studies show children learn better when education is fun." After the school visit, Zorthax was quiet as they drove back to the base. His mind was processing everything he had seen. "Lieutenant Miller," he finally said, "the war simulation that your nephew plays, where did it come from?" "The game. It was developed by a company called Stellar Dynamics, I think." "And this company, it has connections to your military." John laughed. "Not directly, no. But a lot of game developers are former military. They use their experience to make games more realistic." Zorthax's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. "So your military veterans create entertainment that teaches children military strategy?" "I wouldn't put it that way," John said, looking slightly uncomfortable now. "They're just games. Kids enjoy them." When they returned to the base, Zorthax requested time alone in his quarters. Once there, he connected with the Hegemony High Command through a secure channel. "High Commander, I have made a discovery about humans that requires immediate attention," Zorthax said. He sent the recordings he had made at Kevin's house and at the school. Then he explained what he had observed. "These humans train their young for war through play," he said. "Their children learn complex military strategies before they can even join their armed forces, and they do this across their entire species." The High Commander's expression was grave. "Continue your investigation, Admiral. If what you suggest is true, we may need to reconsider our approach to human integration into the galactic community." Zorthax ended the transmission and stood at his window, looking out at the human military base. Everything seemed normal on the surface. But now he knew the truth. Humans weren't just a species with surprising military success. They were a species bred for war from childhood. They stayed at Lisa's house for almost an hour. Zorthax did not move or speak much during this time. He watched Kevin play with complete focus. What the Admiral saw troubled him more with each passing minute. The boy was not just playing. He was thinking like a fleet commander. When enemy ships appeared in a new formation, Kevin quickly adjusted his strategy. When resources ran low, he made tough choices about which ships to save and which to sacrifice. He planned several moves ahead, setting traps that would only become clear later in the game. These were not the actions of a child having fun. These were the skills of a military mind. "Look at that move," Kevin said excitedly to Zorthax. I made them think I was retreating, but really I was getting them to follow me into range of my hidden ships. Zorthax nodded slowly. A classic ambush strategy. Very effective. Yeah, I learned it works better than just charging in with everything, Kevin said before turning back to his game. The Admiral's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of deep thought among his species. He had used the same strategy during the Proxima conflict, but it had taken him years of military training to master it. This human child learned it from playing a game. Without being noticed, Zorthax pressed a small device on his wrist armor. It began recording the game session. The Hegemony High Command needed to see this. The physics in this simulation are remarkably accurate, Zorthax said quietly to John. Yeah, the game developers pride themselves on realism, John replied. The ship movements, weapon effects, even the resource management is based on actual space combat theories. And how many human children play this game? Millions, I guess. It's one of the most popular titles out there. Kids of all ages play it. Millions, millions of young humans learning advanced military tactics through play. Learning to think like commanders before they were even old enough to join their military forces. On the screen, Kevin's fleet executed a complex maneuver. He split his forces into 3 groups, each with a specific role in his battle plan. One group created a distraction, another protected vital resources, while the third moved into position for a decisive strike. That is the tricorn formation, Zorthax said, unable to hide his surprise. It is a high-level military tactic. Kevin looked up at him. Is that what it's called? I just call it the 3-way split. It works really well against bigger forces. Indeed it does, the Admiral agreed. Our academy teaches this maneuver to senior officers only. Lisa laughed softly. Well, Kevin figured it out on his own. He's always been good at these strategy games. Zorthax's mind raced. The tricorn formation was developed by the Hegemony's best tacticians after centuries of warfare. This human child had independently discovered the same strategy through play. Admiral, we should continue our tour, John suggested, checking the time. We have other places to visit today. Zorthax nodded, though he was reluctant to leave. Yes, thank you for allowing me to observe, young Kevin. No problem, Kevin said without looking away from his game. Maybe next time you can play too. I bet you'd be pretty good. As they left the house, Zorthax walked in silence. The implications of what he had seen were enormous. Humans weren't just playing games. They were training their young for war without them even realizing it. Is something wrong, Admiral? John asked as they walked back to their transport. Not wrong, Lieutenant Miller. Just enlightening. Zorthax looked back at the ordinary house where an ordinary human child was mastering military strategies that took other species decades to learn. For the first time since arriving on Earth, the Admiral felt something he had not expected to feel. Fear. After visiting the community center, Zorthax and Lieutenant John Miller walked through the quiet streets of the suburban neighborhood. The Admiral's large feet made soft thumping sounds on the sidewalk. Humans went about their daily lives, some stopping to stare at the tall alien visitor. Your species seems very calm despite having a visitor from another world walking among them, Zorthax said. John smiled. We've had aliens visiting for a few years now. People in this area are used to it. They turned onto a street lined with houses, each with its own small yard. The afternoon sun made Zorthax's scales shimmer slightly. As they walked, the Admiral's sensitive ears picked up a sound that made him stop suddenly. What is that noise? He asked, his head turning toward one of the houses. It sounds like a battle. John listened for a moment, then laughed. Oh, that's just coming from my sister's house. My nephew Kevin is probably playing his video games. Video games? Zorthax repeated the unfamiliar term. They're simulations. Entertainment. Kids play them for fun, John explained. The sounds grew louder as they approached the house. Explosions, weapons fire, and commands being shouted. Zorthax's four eyes widened. "Those sound like tactical battle communications," he said. "Are you certain this is merely entertainment?" John nodded. "I'm sure. Kevin plays them all the time. Would you like to see? My sister won't mind a quick visit." Zorthax nodded eagerly. "Yes, I would like to observe this activity." John led them up the short path to the front door and knocked. A moment later, a woman with the same dark hair as John opened the door. She looked surprised to see the large alien standing on her porch, but recovered quickly. "Lisa, this is Admiral Zorthax from the Galactic Hegemony. He's here on a cultural exchange," John said. "Admiral, this is my sister, Lisa Carter." "Welcome to our home," Lisa said with a smile. "Please come in." Zorthax had to duck to enter the house. The ceilings were too low for his tall frame. The battle sounds were much clearer inside. "We heard Kevin playing his game," John explained. The Admiral was curious about it. Lisa led them to a room where a young human boy sat in front of a large screen. The boy was so focused on the images that he didn't notice the visitors. Zorthax stared in amazement at what he saw. The screen showed a complex space battle. Ships moved in formation, attacking and defending. Resource numbers scrolled along the bottom of the display. The boy's fingers moved quickly over a control device, issuing commands and adjusting strategies. "Kevin, we have a visitor," Lisa said gently. The boy looked up, and his eyes grew wide at the sight of Zorthax. "Whoa, a real hegemony officer." "Greetings, young human," Zorthax said. "Please, continue your activity. I wish to observe." Kevin looked at his mother, who nodded. He turned back to his game, quickly becoming absorbed again. Zorthax moved closer, watching with growing interest. The simulation showed a fleet of ships facing an enemy force. Kevin was controlling the fleet, making decisions about ship placement, weapon use, and resource management. Zorthax recognized advanced military tactics in the boy's play. "He flanks the enemy ships," Zorthax whispered. "He creates a diversion with smaller ships, while positioning his larger vessels for maximum effect." John nodded. "He's pretty good at it." "How old is this child?" Zorthax asked quietly. "Kevin is 12, Lisa answered. 12 Earth years, barely more than a hatchling by hegemony standards. Yet this human child was executing maneuvers that would impress veteran commanders in the hegemony fleet. "This is a game?" Zorthax asked again, his voice low. "Not training." "Just a game," John confirmed. "One of the most popular ones. Kids all over Earth play it." Zorthax watched in silence as Kevin continued to play. The boy shouted commands to virtual crew members, made split-second decisions, and cheered when his strategy succeeded. In his play, Zorthax saw something that troubled him deeply, something the hegemony should know about. Admiral Zorthax stood tall on the bridge of his ship as Earth came into view. His four eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the blue-green planet. The home of humans looked so peaceful from space. It was hard to believe that such a physically weak species had earned such a fearsome reputation. "We are cleared for landing," Admiral said, his second-in-command. Zorthax nodded, his scaled skin catching the light. "Proceed with caution. Remember, this is a diplomatic mission. The humans may be small, but they are unpredictable." The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, heading toward the designated landing area near a human military base. Zorthax had studied humans for years, but this was his first time visiting their homeworld. The Galactic Hegemony had been watching humans closely since they developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. When the ship landed, Zorthax straightened his ceremonial armor. First impressions mattered, especially when dealing with a species that the hegemony was still unsure about. Many in the Hegemony Council wanted to limit human expansion into space. Others saw potential in these strange beings. As the ship's doors opened, Zorthax was met by a group of humans in military uniforms. One stepped forward with a smile. "Admiral Zorthax, welcome to Earth. I'm Lieutenant John Miller, your liaison during your stay here." Zorthax looked down at the human. John Miller was tall for a human, but still a head shorter than the Admiral. How strange that these soft creatures with no claws, weak muscles, and dull teeth had managed to defeat 3 different alien armadas in their brief time among the stars. "Lieutenant Miller, I am pleased to meet you," Zorthax said, trying to make his voice softer. Humans seem to find the natural hegemony voice too harsh. "I look forward to learning more about your species. We have a full schedule planned," John said, as he led the Admiral to a waiting transport vehicle. "The cultural exchange program is very important to our government. We want the hegemony to understand that humans come in peace." Zorthax made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Yet you are always prepared for war, are you not?" John smiled but said nothing as they entered the vehicle. The transport took them from the military base into what John called a suburban area. Zorthax watched through the window as they passed rows of small dwellings with patches of plant life around them. "These are homes?" Zorthax asked. "Yes, regular people live here. Families with children, older folks, all kinds of people," John explained. "We thought you might want to see how everyday humans live, not just military installations." Zorthax nodded slowly. This made sense. To understand a species, one must observe their young and their living spaces. "Your buildings seem so fragile," the Admiral noted. "They're stronger than they look," John replied. "Kind of like us." The vehicle stopped in front of a building that John explained was a community center. Several humans of different ages were entering and exiting. "We'll start here," John said. "It's a place where humans gather for social activities." As they walked toward the building, Zorthax noticed how the other humans stared at him. Some small ones, children, he remembered they were called, pointed and whispered. None seemed afraid, only curious. "Your young ones are not taught to fear aliens?" Zorthax asked. John shook his head. "We teach them to be careful, but not fearful. Most human children are actually excited to meet beings from other worlds." This was different from hegemony worlds, where young ones were taught to be wary of other species. Humans were strange indeed, so physically weak, yet so confident, so new to the galactic community, yet already making their mark. Zorthax had much to learn about these puzzling creatures, and he had a feeling that understanding their unusual strength might be the key to the hegemony's future relations with Earth.